All right, welcome to College Football Addiction. Happy Sunday. Before these NFL games get started, let's talk a little bit about that USC Michigan game from yesterday. Probably the game of the day. I know that Tennessee Oklahoma was billed as kind of like the game day. I get it, but the USC Michigan game was phenomenal, and there was a lot of fun stuff. Colorado Baylor was really fun late. I get it, but this was a contrast in styles that I think we knew we would get. I think we knew we would get a contrast in the way that these teams played. But I mean, it played out wonderfully on Saturday. Obviously, you would have maybe liked to see a little more excitement in the first half if you're a USC fan. You certainly wanted to see a USC win if you were a USC fan. And they had their chances. Michigan certainly let USC stay in this thing and didn't really put them away. And USC even had a chance with a couple of minutes left in the lead, but couldn't get it done. Michigan, old school, smash mouth football, just from the start. Their defense was phenomenal. They, I think we saw that Texas game and we thought, man, Michigan is maybe they're just there's too big of a step back. They're just not good enough. They lost too much of the drive. Whatever your take on Michigan at that point it was. We even had Seth on and he said like, yeah, they just this, that, the other, whatever the issues you see are. They're just going to struggle this year. And so then USC came into this thing as a favorite on the road. I mean, at one point they were like 6.5, 7 points. That got bet down closer to kickoff. And I think good coaches, whether that's Jerome or anybody, I think they use that to motivate their players. Hey, nobody believes in you. Everybody doubts you. Defense, you go out and win us this game. And that defense was absolutely on fire to start the game and honestly giving up 3 points in the first half. Really, really impressive overall. Old school smash mouth football, running the ball. Both Mullings and Edwards were both phenomenal. They were on one yesterday. At 14-0, when they're both running into the end zone, just breaking tackles, the line's making holes. They're getting, long touchdown runs, long runs to get them down the field. 14-0, the way the defense was playing, I mean, you knew that with USC's offense, with Miller Moss, you knew that they're never really out of a game. But I don't think USC's offense is quite like Texas. I don't think USC's offense is quite like what you got from the Longhorns. And so it didn't feel like it was over at that point, but it did kind of feel like, man, this is teetering on the verge of a blowout. This is teetering to a place that they're not going to be able to come back from. Michigan's trenches were really, really good, and that shouldn't surprise anybody, right? A Michigan team that's got good trenches. Whoa, you're blowing my mind there, TJ. No, not quite. But USC's trenches are really good, and they showed up really well against LSU. That USC front is elite, and the fact that Michigan was able to just go off rushing the ball is really, really impressive. But again, credit to USC for not backing down. Now, I wouldn't ever expect a USC team with an offense that's high-powered and a quarterback like Miller Moss to quit or ever hang their head or think they're out of it. Couple of nice throws from Moss that gets USC down in the red zone. But at the end of the day, the Michigan defense stiffens and they can't get the ball into the end zone. And to me, that was not to play the game, but in the first half, that was huge. To go in 14-3 instead of 14-7, it still feels like you got this big mountain to climb. And especially considering how the half ended. USC somewhat in field goal range. You didn't want to take a sack like on the last play like they did. That ends the half. But if you get a completion there, you probably can attempt a long field goal. Maybe it's 14-6, which would have been huge considering how the game ended. And what they did to open up the second half. Really, really nice drive by USC to open up the second half. Make it 14-10. Moss looked really great. Finding guys wide open. The offensive line finally gave him some time. They got the run kind of going a little bit. They looked a lot better. That's kind of the USC I think people expected coming into this game. And, coaches do a good job of halftime adjustments. I think this was a case of that. They came out. They kind of had a scripted, it looked like, drive there in the second half. A lot of times you think about that with your opening drive, your first possession. Looks like they did that their second half, and it got them back in the game. 14-10 at that point was huge. USC forces a stop, gets the ball back. I thought their pass rush was really good in the second half. They got after Orgy a little bit more. Obviously, Michigan was pretty one-dimensional. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But I do think that helped a ton. Play of the game, though, to me, was the pick six. Will Johnson shut the door on what it ended up being. And USC even came back and got a lead at one point. But going up 21-10, I think if USC goes down and scores on this drive, right, without the Johnson pick six, so what would that have been at that point? That would have been 17-14. if they get up 17-14, I kind of think USC ends up winning this thing. Just I think USC's offense was figuring things out, and they ended up scoring more as the game went on. They ended up being able to drive on Michigan pretty well. And I think the idea of them going up here may have changed the result of the game. Now, not necessarily. Michigan still certainly could have won. They came back late in the game too. But if there would have been more possessions, I think I would have had a little more faith in USC's offense as opposed to Michigan's. Now, Michigan got it done when it counted, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think this was the play of the game. Just an elite job coming off your guy, jumping a route, and, as soon as he caught it, you knew that he was gone. Like, he caught that in like the perfect stride, like could not have been a prettier pick six. Just the way he jumped the route, jumped in front of it, and ran it back. Best corner in the country, many will say. I know Michigan fans, I know you think he is, and I certainly wouldn't disagree. 2 pick sixes already on a young season. Kid's legit, and again, to me, that's the play of the game. If you disagree, hit the comments. Let me know what you think the play of the game is. But to me, that was it. How about this wild sequence where I thought in live time it was an incomplete pass by Miller Moss on that third down, which would have been bad for USC. They would have probably just had to kick the field goal there, but ends up being a fumble by Miller Moss, a return by Michigan, and then a strip. What effort by the offensive player, who was then a defensive player because the Michigan kid's running it back. What effort there to strip the ball and get it back for USC. USC ends up scoring a touchdown a couple of plays later on a wide open corner blitzes. Miller Moss finds the receiver. Easy touchdown to get USC back within 4 points at that point, 3 points at that point. Because they missed the extra point. So it was 20-17 at that point. Michigan still led. And, Michigan, to me, like the story of the game was Michigan, not the story of the game, but the story of the second half certainly was Michigan just like trying to give the game away almost. Like just completely, what do the kids call it? Like blowing the cash or dropping the bag or whatever, they, from if the defensive lineman running the ball back falls down and doesn't fumble, they're in great shape with a 2-score lead. The fumble deep in your own territory leads to another touchdown by USC on a 3rd and 16, a great throw by Moss. And so back-to-back possessions, the one wasn't really a possession. They had possession for about 15 seconds or 10 seconds while the kid was running the ball back. But back-to-back fumbles lead to USC touchdowns. Without that, I don't know the Trojans get all the way back in it. I know their offense was moving a little bit better and they made some nice plays. Not trying to take away from USC at all, but Michigan, man, nearly gave this game away a couple of times. Trojans go up 24-17. Mullings on a 3rd and 1 to end up ending the thing. Long run. I think it was 63 yards, and then obviously they get in on 4th and goal. I wasn't confident they were going to. USC's D-line on that goal line stand did really well, forced them into a 4th down. They just couldn't get that last play. The extra effort, the second effort, the block, and then following the fullback was really impressive. They get the game winner. A few thoughts as we wrap up, but again, a fun game. USC going to feel like if they'd have started a little bit quicker, they'd have probably had a chance to win this thing. Michigan had chances to put this thing away, couldn't keep their hands on the ball, couldn't stop fumbling, couldn't put them away when they needed to, needed some last-second heroics. They got it, but certainly things to clean up from both sides. Couple of thoughts, and then we'll jump out. If you're watching this, USC, Michigan, I think you're both in really good shape going forward. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. You're both going to have massive games throughout the year, and I'm excited to talk with you about it. If you appreciate the content, if you appreciate the takes, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I certainly will appreciate it here at College Football Addiction. I think Miller Moss is legit. This game didn't change that for me at all. Obviously, the pick six was massive. It changed the game. It probably was the deciding factor in the game at the end of the day. But I think he's legit. He's going to bounce back. USC will be just fine. They can't start so slow. USC's got to find a way to start a little faster. And I know it's Michigan. I know how good their defense is. I know it's the big house. But if you want to be the elites, right? If you want to be up there considered with the elites, I mean, Texas didn't start slow. Texas came out and was able to put up some points in the first half. They weren't lighting the world on fire. They weren't, LSU 2019. I get it. But you got to find a way to convert. You get down in the red area, you get down in the red zone, you got to find a way to convert those into touchdowns. You score that touchdown there, you probably end up winning the game, right? Like Texas had their chances. USC had their chances in this. They just couldn't convert. They couldn't convert at the end of the day, and that made it kind of rough. I do think USC will be fine. I don't worry about them at all. They showed a lot of fight. They showed a lot of grit. Michigan, though, is the story of the day. They proved everyone wrong. Everyone doubted. Everyone thought that Michigan couldn't get it done, even though they were at home. Everybody's on USC. Everybody's picking the Trojans. Michigan with a quarterback switch, this, that, and the other. They would be one-dimensional. They were one-dimensional, but they still got it done the way they wanted to. It's kind of like Babe Ruth pointing, right? Like, hey, I'm going right there, and then he does it anyway. Michigan told everybody how they were going to win this game. Hey, we're going to run the ball. We're going to play defense, and we're going to beat you. And that's what they did, right? And Michigan really had chances to kind of blow this open even further if they fall down with that first fumble. If they don't fumble it late, they win this game kind of going away. If they get anything out of the passing game, certainly that, they kind of win this thing in blowout fashion. Their defense is so legit. Their defense reminds me of, I know you guys see the Seminole signed Bobby Bowden football back there. It reminds me of Florida State at the end of last year when their quarterback just wasn't, quarterback was hurt, backup not really up to snuff. So they had to just play defense and run the ball. And that they did, right? That defense took over yesterday, was insanely good. And they're going to win a lot of games because of that, right? Everybody wrote Michigan off after the Texas game. I don't necessarily know that Michigan is written off just yet. Running game for Michigan is insanely good. Both those guys we mentioned are phenomenal, and they will continue to be. Orji ran the ball really well. His stat line was insane. Not to disparage a kid that ends up winning as a quarterback, but 7 for 12, 32 yards. I think Michigan can't be so one-dimensional, right? They're going to have to get something out of the passing game, but they're not going to see too many defenses that are better than USC, especially not defensive fronts. And so I do think that Orji, that was his first start, certainly not writing him off just yet, but I do think that as time goes, he will get better. With their defense, though, and that rushing attack, it's hard for me to think that teams could completely shut them down. You put 8 in the box and try your best. But again, how many fronts are they going to see that are better than USC's? And certainly, they got to play Oregon. They got to play Ohio State. There's quality opponents coming up. But how many are going to be better than USC's? Not very many. With their defense, though, shutting teams down, certainly possible for them to win with old school smash mouth football, right? That was fun to watch. They've got Minnesota, Washington, Illinois up next. Certainly 3 games that you would think that they should win. I know Illinois looks really good on Friday night. We talked about that in their win against Nebraska. I don't know Illinois will be able to score like that on Michigan, and I think Michigan will be able to move the ball on Illinois pretty good as well, certainly running the ball. So I think that there's really no excuse for Michigan to not win their next 3 games. You win your next 3 games, what are you, 6-1? I think you're in pretty good shape there as you continue on, and you're looking at it and saying, okay, well, we got the one loss against Texas. We're still undefeated in the conference. If you win your next 3, they're in really good shape to try and compete before they play Oregon, Ohio State later in the year. USC, again, I still think they're going to be fine. You look at their schedule as it comes up. Wisconsin, Minnesota, they do play Penn State, but then Maryland, Rutgers, Washington. Maryland, not necessarily a pushover. Minnesota looked pretty good yesterday. I know that Iowa's not, maybe what we expect typically, but and then Rutgers, Washington, Wisconsin, teams that I think USC is supremely talented, some way more talented than. I know you picked up a Big Ten loss, but you look at that Penn State game is going to be huge. I like USC in that right now. We are 3-4 weeks out. I'm certainly not making a prediction right now, but as from what I saw yesterday, I tend to think that USC is slightly better. I like their front a little bit better. I like Miller Moss in that quarterback matchup against Aller, although I think Aller is better than I gave him credit for earlier in the year. But I think USC has a really good chance to win your next, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Big Ten games, be 6-1 in the Big Ten. And then, they're going to need some help. They're going to need some big wins, but maybe find your way into a Big Ten championship game based on, what happens around them, what they're able to do, and what happens with other teams that they're going up against. So I think USC will be fine. That was a really tough game yesterday, really tough place to play. You did some good things. You had some chances, just couldn't get it done at the end of the day. Pick 6 was big. Not being able to stop the run was big, but I don't know how many rushing attacks they're going to see. They're better than Michigan's either. So USC is not going to play teams that are that much. A big shout out to USC though. I kind of thought their physicality was going to be their detriment here, and they look like a physical team. I don't know that they look like a 2020 Big Ten physical team, but they're very physical, and they do a good job in the trenches. They do a good job on both sides of the line, and I think you've got a quarterback that's top 10-ish in the country, right? Maybe I kind of need to think through some guys, but top 10, top 15 in the country. You're going to have a chance to win a lot of games, right? In the Big Ten, where They are physical. They're as physical as Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Minnesota, Wisconsin for sure. And then I kind of like them against Penn State too. They can't have that letdown game, but if they can win their next 6, they're in really good shape. So a week at a time, we'll continue to do this. If you like the content, if you like the takes, let me know your thoughts down below and hit that subscribe button. We appreciate the growth of the channel. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. But a big one for Michigan. And I think, a lot of people wrote them off. They're not ready to be written off just yet. So appreciate you guys again for tuning in to College Football Addiction.